All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. I want to say good morning to each and every one of you. Good morning, good morning, good morning. And I don't know what was happening with my screen yesterday on Periscope, but I could not see anybody and I could not see anybody's comments. So I want to say good morning. I can see you all today. Good morning, Lady Barbara. Good morning, Pastor Ben. Good morning, Bespoke. I'm also today streaming live on my YouTube channel. Periscope has been giving me the last 2 days. They have jacked up my files so that I cannot upload them. So the last 2 episodes, I don't have a record of them outside of Periscope and Facebook Live, which is why I'm choosing to live stream directly onto my YouTube channel today so that the archive will be up there. All right, so that's a little bit of the difference of what I'm doing today. If you are jumping on YouTube and you are live streaming or you're watching the live stream by YouTube, all comments are held for review on YouTube. So if you are commenting and I'm not responding back, that is why. All right. So just a little bit of housekeeping as we start out this morning. I hope everybody is having a great and wonderful Friday. I was up rearranging my life early this morning, and then earlier than that, I was up in a middle of the night praise party with my husband. So I'm a little wired. So if I seem a little wired, that's the reason why. But somebody asked me the question, what is happiness? And this is what I wrote. I said, happiness is wearing matching robes, eating snacks, and having an art jam session with your husband at 1:29 in the morning. Yes, kingdom marriages rock. Marriage on purpose. He gets me. I get him. Artist life. Hashtag creatives marry creatives. All right? You marry a creative, you won't have to explain that to a creative because they'll know exactly what you're talking about. Okay? So we're going to start out this morning. I'm going to cover 2 of the books that we did not get a chance to cover. I believe it was Wednesday. We're going to look at The Daily Stoic and then The Kingdom Marriage. And then we're going to finish up on helpful tips for your brain, keeping your brain active, and then some tools of Titans from a businessman. He's going to give us some tips, and he was actually a former Navy SEALs, and he has some really good stuff to say. And then we'll be done for Friday. So I hope that everything, like I said, is going well with you. I hope that you have great plans for this weekend. I know we do. We're going to be down in our region in Virginia, and we're going to be doing some strategic prayer in our region where we deal with white supremacists quite a bit. So that's always fun. Bringing the gospel to people who think that they're the only superior ones in the world. So here we go. Daily Stoic. I want to read 2 passages from the Daily Stoic today. And this is actually a book centered around the Stoics and Stoicism and some of their sayings that they were writing. People like Seneca and Epictetus, those are who we're reading from today. So the first thought is, the good life is anywhere. The good life is anywhere. And this comes from Seneca, Moral Letters. He says, at this moment, you aren't on a journey, but wandering about, being driven from place to place, even though what you seek to live well is found in all places. Is there any place more full of confusion than the forum? Yet even there you can live at peace if needed. A well-known writer once complained that after becoming successful, wealthy friends were always inviting him to their beautiful exotic houses. Come to our home in the south of France, they would say, or our Swiss ski chalet is a wonderful place to write. The writer traveled the world living in luxury, hoping to find inspiration and creativity in these inspiring manors and mansions. Yet it rarely happened. There was always the allure of another, better house. There were always distractions, always so many things to do. And the writer's block and insecurity that plagued some creative types traveled with him wherever he went. We tell ourselves that we need the right setup before we finally buckle down and get serious. Or we tell ourselves that some vacation or time alone will be good for a relationship or an ailment. This is self-deceit at its finest. It's far better that we become pragmatic and adaptable, able to do what we need to do anywhere, anytime. The place to do your work and to live the good life is here. So I actually happen to agree with that sentiment. If you're consistently waiting for the right place or the right time to get certain things done, trust and believe they won't get done. I remember during my time of transition where I didn't have a home, I got a lot of stuff done. I got paintings done. I mean, I would take all of my art supplies and I would literally go to a cafe and I would paint there, because where I was, there was really no privacy to do that kind of thing. And the space was very confined. So what did I do? I didn't let that stop me. I just took all my supplies and I went to a place that had tables, that had open space, and that was welcoming to artists. And I worked there and created my paintings. Helping people get their books published. I was doing that when I was dealing with issues myself. So again, like the writer is saying here, the place to do your work and to live your good life is now. All right. Sometimes we're waiting on the better to happen, when if you get to work and if you are doing your purpose, you will walk into the better, if that makes any sense. All right. So I actually agree with that. The good life is anywhere. The good life is anywhere you choose to make it, regardless of the circumstances that you're in. Second one here is by Epictetus in his writings called Discourses. And the theme here is no blame, just focus. No blame, just focus. You must stop blaming God and not blame any person. You must completely control your desire and shift your avoidance to what lies within your reasoned choice. You must no longer feel anger, resentment, envy, or regret. And most of us know that those four things tend to bring people down, or it tends to stop them in their tracks altogether, and they get stuck on feeling angry or feeling resentful or feeling envious about what somebody else has, or feeling regretful about what they didn't get done or what they didn't accomplish, right? So with those four things, if you think about it, if you can manage to control your anger, if you can manage to stop being resentful, if you can manage to live a life above envy and learn how to celebrate other people, and if you can live a life without regret, you're doing pretty good. All right? You're doing pretty good. He says this. The writer says this. Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for resistance to the brutal apartheid regime in South Africa for 27 years. For 18 of those years, he had a bucket for a toilet, a hard cot in a small cell, and once a year he was allowed a single visitor for 30 minutes. It was vicious treatment meant to isolate and break down the prisoners. And yet, in spite of that, Mandela became a figure of dignity within the prison. Though he was deprived of many things, he still found creative ways to assert his will. As one of his fellow prisoners, Neville Alexander, explained on Frontline, he, Mandela, always made the point, if they say you must run, insist on walking. If they say you must walk fast, insist on walking slowly. That was the whole point. We're going to set the terms. He pretended to jump rope and shadow box to stay in shape. He held his head higher than the other prisoners, encouraged them when times got tough, and always retained his sense of self-assurance. That self-assurance is yours to claim as well. No matter what happens today, no matter where you find yourself, shift to what lies within your reasoned choices. Ignore as best you can the emotions that pop up, which would distract you, which would be so easy to distract yourself with. Don't get emotional. stay focused. Right, Rocky? Stay focused. Okay? So, no blame, just focus. Everything is not going to turn out the way you want in life, right? But again, if you work on those emotions, anger, resentment, envy, and regret, if you can get a hold of those 4, you're going to be okay. Just focus and keep it moving. Yeah, that's kind of how I live life. People do crazy stuff to me. You know what? Life is too short to be resentful, angry, bitter. I'm gonna let it go and keep moving. Don't you carry nothing that might be a load. Come on, ease on down the road, right? All right, kingdom marriage. I know some of you all watching aren't married, but you just might be in the future. So, hang in there with us. We're only going to be in this book for a few minutes for those of y'all who run and are afraid at the word marriage. All right. So we're reading a little bit of Tony Evans' chapter, and he's talking about opposition. Opposition. Okay. And let me see. I think I'll read up to just a few pages. All right. He says this: a healthy, vibrant marriage is all about focus. Look at that, tying right in. Is your focus on God and his purpose and power, or is it on yourself and what you want? A couple came to my office for counseling not too long ago, and they brought a list with them. This list must have had at least 30 or more things written on it. I remember feeling instantly depressed as I watched them pull out that list. It was as if I was a balloon and someone had taken a needle and deflated me. How am I going to help them solve so many issues? I thought as they began to read each and every item on the list. On and on they read, naming what sounded like legitimate sources of conflict. These were real issues, and I could see why they were not getting along. Once the couple finished reading the list, the husband handed it to me. In a split second, I had to make a decision. Was I going to go through this list with them and provide input on each issue they'd written down, or was I going to address the source of their conflict? I looked at the list, then I looked at the couple, both of whom had hopelessness and even anger written all over their faces. Then I looked back at the list, carefully and thoughtfully penned, and I tore it up right there in front of them. You can imagine what their faces looked like. I can too. They had taken quite a bit of time to prepare this list for our meeting, and I had just shredded it. I leaned toward them and said in a soft but firm tone, "What you just gave me is the fruit. It's real, but it's the fruit. It's like a firecracker that shoots up into the sky and explodes. Only one thing is shot up there, but when it explodes, it goes into all of these other different directions. What I want to talk to you about is the one thing, not the explosion. We could talk about these 30 things on your list, but nothing will ultimately change in your marriage because this one thing is missing: the spiritual foundation of your relationship. Without establishing and maintaining a solid spiritual relationship, your list of 30 things once solved will just morph into another 30 things. And you'll wind up back in here the same time next year with another list of 30 things to solve." I could tell they were both listening intently, so I continued. "Get this one thing right, and all other things will fall into place. Get a divine perspective on your marriage as the foundation for your home, and you'll discover who your true enemy is, and it is not each other." Let me take a sip right there. I'm sorry. I love the Jeopardy theme music. But listen. Listen. This is so powerful. And I often tell people, well, my husband and I often share with people that God gave us a divine perspective on why we were getting married. And when we talk to other couples sometimes, it seems as if what we're saying to them is strange. And sometimes we get funny looks when we tell, how God put us together. But the reality is, without a divine perspective on your marriage, you are going to be in trouble. Why? Because there are some days when your spouse is going to get on your last nerve. They are. It's guaranteed. Because we're human. There are going to be some days. Exactly, Pastor. There are going to be some days when you may not understand your spouse's reasoning. It's going to happen. Guaranteed. But you know what? When you have divine perspective for why you married, you will be able to bear with your spouse even when you don't understand them. Even when you don't understand their decision making. Even when you don't understand, maybe their exorbitant amount of time that they spend in prayer. Even when you don't understand their 50 hobbies that they have to go do in order to enjoy themselves. When you have a divine perspective of your marriage as a whole, you are seeing the bigger picture than just your day-to-day things. But that big picture helps you to put your day-to-day life in perspective. So God, being the foundation and giving you a perspective of why he put you two together in the earth in the first place, is very important. All right? Some people say they want to get married to have children. Well, what if she never has children? If that was your only reason for marrying, it's going to be a problem. Some people get married because, they want their spouse to be their all in all. Maybe they had a bad family relationship, and so they're looking for their spouse to fulfill those familial bonds, okay? But your spouse can't be everything to you. All right? So you have to get a divine perspective on what your marriage is called to do in the earth. Every marriage has a purpose. And the purpose goes beyond you two look good together in a selfie. I know. Pew, pew, pew. I know. Marriage has a purpose beyond looking good on paper. I know. Marriage has a purpose beyond cute little babies. There are couples who have had plenty of children and tragedy strikes and there's no more children. And guess what? Some of those marriages have dissolved. Okay? Because maybe one of the other spouse was in it to produce children. All right? So marriage has a divine purpose for it beyond our personal needs and desires. So if you want to be married, one of the major questions you can be asking yourself is, God, if I do get married, what is it that my marriage is supposed to fulfill in the earth? What is my marriage supposed to be an example of? When people look at me and my spouse, what are they supposed to learn about you by looking at us? I'm going to keep going. All right. He says this. When we fight in our marriages, we assume that our spouses are the problem. And that's exactly what the devil wants. He wants you to believe that your spouse is the problem, not you. He knows you will never fix the real problem if you believe that the person you're fighting with is the problem. But your spouse is not the problem. The problem is a spiritual one brought on by sinful flesh or by a rebellious and clever enemy of God named Satan. Think about it. Much of what you end up fighting about in your marriage has nothing to do with what you're really fighting about. There's usually a deeper, unmet need, a lack of trust, a lack of respect, or any number of things. These are the root of the problem and the fights. However, what makes a marriage strong is loving with a biblical love grounded in patience, kindness, loyalty, grace, and more, which is in alignment with God's covenantal purpose for marriage. Yet a lot of the things we end up fighting about have to do with the consequences of our own choices, as well as the demonic realm working against us. All right? One little thing can easily turn into a conflict that puts us on a path to divorce court. And we end up wondering how something so small could destroy something so big. I remember, I don't remember where I was looking at it, but it was a show and the woman was talking about she wanted a divorce because her husband would leave the toilet up. Her husband would drop his clothes on the floor. And the root issue for her was every time she would tell him to do something, he would say that he was going to get to it, but he never got to it. And so for her, in her mind, it actually translated to anything she told him, even though it was only those two things. But in her mind, it became, he doesn't keep his word. He doesn't follow through. So she took something that was minute in two areas and turned it into her whole thesis as to why she wanted a divorce. And I was looking like, this lady is crazy. But as Tony Evans was saying, little things can easily turn into a conflict that puts people on the path to divorce court. Because in her mind, she saw it as he was completely not listening to her and her feelings about what he was doing. And so the more he did it, the more it solidified in her mind that that was the kind of person he was overall. She moved it from one or two things to making it his whole entire character. And that's what the enemy tries to do in many marriages. He takes one thing and he exaggerates it or magnifies it to the point where that is all you see about your spouse. And so you start making, as the saying goes, you start making a mountain out of a molehill when it's something that's very specific that's happening, but you take it and you exaggerate it and you make it be the whole crux of your marriage. All right. He says it can do that because, again, it's not the one little thing. It's about breaking the marriage covenant through a lack of submission by both parties under the transcendence of God, a lack of alignment with each other and God, or violating the covenantal rules of love and respect. Listen, ladies, those of you who want to be married, if you are dating a man and you think he's a fool now, if you're dating a man and you don't believe what he says now, if you're dating a man and you don't respect his choices and decisions now, don't marry him. Let me sip my coffee. Because I'm telling you now, it's not going to get better. Listen, if you don't respect him now, before a covenant and a ring, he's now going to be spiritually over this decision making for your whole house. So if you're having a hard time respecting him now and you all are just dating, it's time to say, brother, I can't do this. Your decision making is concerning to me. And if it's concerning to me now, it's going to be it's going to be really concerning when you say I do. If he doesn't want to listen to any male authority now, if he struggles with listening to his superiors on his job now, what makes you think he's going to listen to you in a marriage? I'm just trying to help somebody. Cut the cord now. Let me keep reading. Exactly. We are just not compatible. Thank you, Bespoke. I am very thankful for the women in my life who sat me down and talked to me about love, companionship, and compatibility. Those three right there. So let me continue. If we are unable to truly comprehend and correct your focus by making a spiritual connection to everything that goes on in your marriage, you will continue to rant and rave about whatever the current issue is. You will continue to focus on the thing that's happening without realizing that the core issue is to blame. A failure to align under the fundamentals of a covenant in order to be in position to receive the blessings God has promised. After all, isn't that what happened to Adam and Eve in the garden? Again, it really wasn't about the fruit, was it? Rather, it was a failure to abide in God's covenantal provision. It was a failure to take God at his word. Once God's word begins to get twisted and warped, all hell breaks loose. We witnessed that not only with Adam and Eve, but also with their children when Cain went on to kill Abel. Adam and Eve's marriage eventually affected the entire world as God ultimately destroyed it in a flood. Even to this day, we live under the results of what they did in the garden. So even us being redeemed human beings in salvation, the earth is still not redeemed from the curse. I had to explain this to somebody the other evening because they were talking about the earthquakes and the hurricanes and all of this stuff. And my thing is, the earth is not yet redeemed from the curse. You are personally, your soul is, but the earth itself is not. So some of the things that we see are part judgment. Some of the things that we see are part human beings not taking proper care of the environment. And some of the things we are seeing is the fact that the earth is not redeemed from the curse. All right. So it's more than one factor going on. Satan showed up to get Adam and Eve to do more than simply take a bite out of some fruit. He showed up to destroy the family so that he could regain a portion of the rule he lost at his fall. Satan showed up to distort God's image, since male and female were created in the image of God and together were the most complete manifestation of God's image. Let me say that one more time. All right. The Lord created male. Can y'all see my little figures? The Lord created male and female. All right. And he said, if I want to give a complete picture of who I am as God, I want one male and one female to give this complete picture. You see, the picture is not complete here. This is not a complete picture. Can y'all see that? Let me do this. All right. This is not a complete picture of God. Okay. I'm just trying to make it plain for some of y'all who don't understand. Well, why we can't? I'm telling you why. This is not a complete picture of God. Hello, somebody. This is not a complete picture of God. The only way you get a complete picture of God is when you have this. The two becoming one to do what? To do what? To do this. To produce offspring. That's the picture that God established. Not our opinion. That's his picture, not ours. That's his picture, not ours. Okay? So, when we do this, all right, we know that this cannot be possible unless we do what? Unless we modify the plan of God. And we know this is not possible unless we modify, thank you, Lady Barbara, or distort the plan of God. So, again, God said, this is an incomplete picture. It might fulfill other people's version, okay? But it's not God's version. This might fulfill the world's version, but it's not God's version. So if you want to box with God on that, you can go right ahead. But I'm not going to. So, together, male and female were created in the image of God to be the most complete manifestation of God's image. He did this by challenging and changing God's word. This is what the enemy did. He challenged and he changed God's word, reversing the roles of men and women and introducing a demonic presence into their life decisions. Like he did with Adam and Eve. Satan wants to destroy your marriage, not just because he wants to just destroy your marriage, but because he wants to destroy your legacy. He wants to destroy the image of what God intended. And if you have children, or were planning to have children, he can mess up that whole legacy, that whole future. Whoever owns the family owns the future. Look around you and pay attention to how many things, how many laws right now are being put out to separate families, to separate mothers, to separate fathers, to arrest parents, to send the children back to another country. All of that is about breaking up family units. You cannot tell me that that is a plan from heaven. Think about that. There's only 2 times I know in scripture where babies were being hunted. Children were being hunted. And that was during the time of Moses. All right? Where the Pharaoh was commanding people to kill the Hebrew children, particularly the male children. And they were throwing them in the river. Then, during Christ's term, Christ's birth time, there was a decree that went out. What was the decree about? It was about killing children, killing the newborn boys or boys 2 and under. All right? So there is a specific demonic attack that happens when something is getting ready to come into the earth that is going to be a solution. Understand what is happening in our world. When you start seeing laws and decrees being given out and being handed down, and now all of a sudden it's affecting whole families and generations and children and separating parents from their children, understand that a solution is getting ready to come into the earth. All right. So let me finish this up and then we're going to move quickly. Whoever owns the family owns the future. The best way for Satan to get to the family is to target your marriage. That's why he approached Eve in the garden the way he did, seeking to subtly turn her heart and her mind from God. God is referenced in a distinct way in Scripture regarding his relationship with humanity before Satan appeared to Eve and tempted her to eat of the forbidden fruit. Every time God is spoken of in conjunction with Adam, he is called the Lord God. Whenever we read the word Lord written in all caps, it stands for the name of God, which is translated Yahweh. This name in the original language reflects God's character and covenantal relationship as master and absolute ruler. However, when Satan approached Eve to persuade her to do that which she shouldn't do, Satan didn't refer to God the way God referred to himself. Rather, he removed the name Lord altogether and simply said, "Indeed, has God said?" Think about that. In this subtle reduction of terms, Satan sought to strip from the conversation any association with God's rulership and relationship with humanity. That joker is slick. In doing so, he kept the concept of religion intact. After all, he did say God, but he removed the relational element of divine authority. Satan chose to bypass Adam and approach Eve in a way that would get her to believe that the authority was actually hers to have. In addition, the evil one spoke to Eve only about the good that the tree of knowledge had to offer and not the evil that would result from it. I remember one time I was reading this particular thing about them eating and they having them being able to have the knowledge of good and evil. And the thing that struck me was the fact that, yes, they had the knowledge of good and evil, but they had no wisdom to go with it. So what good is it to have all this knowledge about good and evil, but you don't know what to do with that knowledge? Okay? Knowledge without instruction or knowledge without direction can be very dangerous. So Satan is only good at giving half of the story. So he tells her about the good part, but he doesn't tell her about the consequences that are going to happen as a result of getting the knowledge of evil as well as good. In biting the fruit that had been forbidden by the one who had the right to forbid it, both Adam and Eve changed their view of their creator from that of Lord God to God. This then ended their intimate fellowship with him that they once shared, and it also ended the freedom of intimacy they had once shared with each other. Not only that, but it pruned the power of their dominion, which had flowed to and through them from the ultimate ruler. So we're going to stop there. Next week, next Wednesday, we'll keep going on this topic of opposition, but we're going to talk about why does Satan stir up this kind of conflict in marriage? Why is he stirring it up? And believe it or not, marriages are under attack. They are. And I'm not talking about newlyweds either. I'm talking about people who have been married for decades. Decades. And the enemy is attacking those marriages. All right. So, the owner's manual. We have been talking about brain health, and we started out by talking about things that we can do for our brain to help our brain stay functioning, stay active, And we talked about last time, we left off at exercising your brain and ways and things that you could do to exercise your brain. And today we're going to talk about food for your thinking. Food for your thinking. Generally, what's harmful to your heart is also harmful to your brain. Make no mistake, while fried potato skins are bursting your buttons, there's also a portion that gets shuttled through your arteries to your brain. Saturated fats, for example, clog arteries that lead to your brain, putting you at increased risk of stroke, while omega-3 fatty acids, those fats found in fish, are helpful for your brain because they help keep your arteries clear. They also alter your neurotransmitters and reduce depression. So these are some foods that are considered best for your brain. All right. The first one, most people already know this one, but nuts. Okay. Nuts, why? Because they contain monosaturated fats to keep your arteries clear, as well as levels of precursors of serotonin to boost your mood. All right. So if you want to be in a good mood and you want some brain food, eat some nuts. I particularly like pistachios. I like mixed fruit with nuts, like the dried trail mix. Those are good. A recommended amount is 1 ounce a day. More is fine, but remember to be careful of calorie overload. An ounce is about 12 walnuts or 24 almonds. The real age difference that it can make for you, for men, it can actually make you look about 3 years younger if you eat lots of nuts, and women 4.4 years younger. The other one, this one, I would say now has probably become a little more problematic because they're finding out so much of our seafood has some kind of toxicity to it. But fish they have down, especially wild salmon, whitefish, catfish, flounder, and mahi-mahi. Okay, they contain artery clearing omega-3 fatty acids. So the only thing that I could recommend as far as fish is making sure you check the source of where you're getting your seafood from. All right, recommended amount is 13.5 ounces a week, or 3 servings about the size of your fist. And the real age difference is 2.8 years younger. Here's another one that is recommended, but again, you have to be careful of how much of this product you're taking in, especially if you are African American and of Asian descent. And I did speak to a doctor about this because they were saying that lots of soy products can increase the chances of, especially African Americans, with developing fibroids. So you don't want to be eating a whole lot of soy, African American women, hint, hint. Soybeans, they contain heart and artery healthy protein, fiber, and fats. Recommended amount is 1 cup a day. And the real age difference is about half a year younger. The other one, tomato juice and spaghetti sauce, which is one of my favorites. They contain folate, lycopene, and other nutrients to keep your arteries young. Thank you, Bespoke. Replace soy with amino acids. Recommended amount of tomato juice or spaghetti sauce, 8 ounces a day of juice, 2 tablespoons of spaghetti sauce. And it can affect your real age by making you look at least 1 year younger. So bring on the spaghetti. All right, the next one is olive oil, nut oils, fish oils, flaxseed, and another favorite of mine, avocados. Yummy, yummy. Why? Because they contain heart-healthy monosaturated fats. Recommended amount is 25% of daily calories should be healthy fats. And the real age difference is 3.4 years younger. And lastly, another of my favorites, especially the dark kind. Real cocoa-based chocolate. Now, if you go in, most chain stores are kind of coming up on this, but you can go in a place like Starbucks. Starbucks carries real cocoa-based chocolate, all right? And why? It increases dopamine release and provides flavonoids, which keep your arteries young. 1 ounce a day to replace milk chocolate, okay? So milk chocolate does not have the same effect as the real cocoa-based chocolate. And if you've ever had real chocolate, it almost has a slightly bitter taste to it, okay? But the real age difference is about 1.2 years younger. So lastly, as we finish up, and then we'll be back in this book next week, myth or fact, coffee is good for your brain. There have been enough studies performed that we can say that drinking 24 ounces of coffee a day decreases your risk of Parkinson's disease by 40% and your risk of Alzheimer's disease by about 20%. We're not quite sure, except to say that it appears that caffeine has a beneficial impact on your neurotransmitters. The effect of caffeine is substantial, whether it's in coffee, tea, or low-calorie soft drinks. It can help you live 3 to 6 months younger. But a warning, 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 warning. For some people, too much caffeine causes irregular heartbeats, difficulty with diabetes, stomach upset, anxiety, or migraines. In some people I've heard experience vertigo, where they have trouble standing up, okay? And in men who suffer from an enlarged prostate condition called benign prostatic hypertrophy, caffeine can make it worse by causing spasms in the urethra. All right, so coffee, for the most part, with some exceptions, is good for your brain. All right, moving on to our last read, and then we're gonna wrap up. Let's do that. Tools of Titans. If I have any military people on here, you can press some hearts. I think you're gonna enjoy this particular gentleman. And if you want to get the book, as you can see, it is a huge book. Tools of Titans. It's broken up into 3 sections: healthy, wealthy, and wise. And today we're looking at the profile of Jocko Willink. Jocko Willink. And I'll write his name out for you so you can check him out. Jocko Willink is his name, and you can find him at jockopodcast.com. He is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt who used to tap out 20 Navy SEALs per workout. He is a legend in the special operations world, and his interview took the internet by storm. Jocko spent 20 years in the U.S. Navy and commanded SEAL Team 3's Task Unit Bruiser, the most highly decorated special operations unit from the Iraq War. Upon returning to the United States, Jocko served as the officer in charge of training for all the West Coast SEAL teams, designing and implementing some of the most challenging and realistic combat training in the world. After retiring from the Navy, he co-founded Echelon Front, a leadership and management consulting company. He has co-authored the #1 New York Times bestseller, Extreme Ownership: How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win. He now discusses war, leadership, business, and life in his top-rated podcast. He is an avid surfer, husband, and father of 4 highly motivated children. So, business principles from Mr. Jocko. The first one is discipline equals freedom. Discipline equals freedom. Now, if you go to a church and they tell you this, somebody is going to flip out and say, I don't ever want to go there again because they're always talking about discipline. Just a little, had to throw that little joke in there for you. Discipline equals freedom. To what would you put on a billboard? He responded, my mantra is a simple one, and that's discipline equals freedom. To interpret this, I mean, among other things, that you can use positive constraints to increase perceived free will and results. Something as simple as a pre-scheduled workout acts as a scaffolding around which you can more effectively plan and execute your day. It also means that if you want freedom in life to be that financial freedom, more free time, or even freedom from sickness and poor health, you can only achieve these things through discipline. Sounds like a biblical principle to me. Discipline equals freedom. Discipline, disciple. Discipleship equals freedom. Whom the Son sets free is free indeed. You are my disciples if you continue in my word. All makes sense to me. Next lesson. 2 is 1 and 1 is none. I even made a little image for you. 2 is 1. So I've got my one person here and one person here. 2 is 1 and one person is really none. This is a common expression amongst the SEALs, Jocko explains. It just means have a backup. If you have 2 of something, you will break or lose 1 and end up with 1 remaining. If you have 1, you will break or lose it and be screwed. One of my favorite Franz Kafka quotes is related. Better to have and not need than to need and not have. Where you can eliminate single points of failure in your life or business, make sure you have a backup plan to handle likely contingencies, which actually, again, is another biblical principle. How do we know this? Because the scripture says 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. So, thank you, Jocko, for my new principle. 2 is 1 and 1 is none. Please have a backup plan. One of the most important lessons he has found in life, he says, is that you must expose yourself to darkness to see the light. I think that in order to truly experience the light and the bright, you have to see the darkness. If you shield yourself from darkness all the time, you'll not appreciate and fully understand the beauty of life. Out of all the interviews I've done, most of the people who've been successful for decades also have methods to cultivate gratitude in their life. For Jocko, it is remembering his friends who have made the ultimate sacrifice in war. He is truly grateful for every sunrise, every smile, every laugh, and every breath. One of the things that Jocko deliberately does is he regularly exposes himself to stories of those who have been subjected to horror, misfortune, and darkness. This helps him to put his life in perspective. And I would venture to say that many people do this or they practice this, but maybe you don't see it as something that you already practice. Like for me, one of the things that helps me to keep my life in perspective is to study my ancestors, to study their horrors, their misfortunes, their times of darkness, and how they actually made it through all of that with a whole lot less of the amenities that we have in 2017. So that's one way of keeping myself mindful of the people who have come before me and being thankful for what we have now. Here's another principle from Jocko. He says, if you want to be tougher, simply do it. If you want to have a tougher mentality, it is simple. Don't meditate on it, just do it. Exactly, John, and good to see you. If they can do it, so can we. So to change, he says, you must begin. It doesn't matter how big or how small you start, the process will never get started if you never start. So in order to change, you must begin somewhere. All right. Whether that is improving your health, whether that is exercise, whether that is eating better, you have to start somewhere. I remember with my husband, all right, and I don't think he'll mind this example, but he didn't like to eat salad a lot. And so I would start off by just giving him a little bit of the green, shrubbery, leafy greens, right? But now his body has come to the point where it craves salads now. But you know what that means for me? That means since I started it, I gotta be consistent and I gotta make some salads. I mean, we can buy salads, yes, but it's better for me because I'm using my skills. I'm using my fine motor skills to prepare the salad. So that's keeping things going for me in my own body, but it's also helping my family to eat better on a consistent basis. All right. So again, the principle: to change, you must begin. And let's see, 2 more he's got. He asked him, how does he feel about starting his day? And Jocko says, this is a good reason to be an early riser. He says, I'm up and getting after my day by 4:45 in the morning. I like to have a psychological win over the enemy. For me, when I wake up in the morning and I don't know why, I'm thinking about the enemy and what they're doing. I know I'm not on active duty anymore, but this mentality is still in my head, that there's a guy in a cave somewhere rocking back and forth with a machine gun in one hand and a grenade in the other. He's waiting for me and we're going to meet. When I wake up in the morning, I'm thinking to myself, what can I do to be ready for that moment which is coming? This propels me out of bed. And I thought that was actually pretty powerful, even if you take it in terms of your spiritual walk. I like to spend midnight, awesome sugarcane, I like to spend midnight to 3 a.m. because if you know anything about prayer watches, that's the overcomer's watch. That's where you get the advantage on the enemy. That's where sometimes God is revealing to you things that are happening in the world and what to pray about. And so I look at that time as a time to dismantle the enemy's plans, and then I go to bed and get back up. But like he said, you want to get an early start. You want to get ahead of your day and think about, how can I be ready for what is coming? How can I be ready for what is coming? All right. And lastly, this is very, very, very powerful. Trying to make sure I don't go past my time, but I just might a little bit today. What makes a good commander? What makes a good manager? What makes a good leader? He says, the immediate answer that comes to mind is humility, because you've got to be humble and you've got to be coachable. When I was running training, we would fire a couple of leaders from every SEAL team because they could not lead. And 99.9% of the time, it wasn't a question of their ability to shoot a weapon. It wasn't because they were not in good physical shape. It wasn't because they were unsafe. It was almost always a question of their ability to listen. Lord have mercy. To open their mind and see that maybe there's a better way to do things. That is from a lack of humility. We put these guys through very realistic and challenging training. And if there are any guys who went through training when I was running it, right now they're probably laughing because it was very realistic. A good leader would come back and say after the training, I lost it, I didn't control it, I didn't do a good job, I didn't see what was happening in certain situations, I got too absorbed in this tiny little tactical situation that was right in front of me. Either they would make those criticisms about themselves, or they would ask me as their commander, what did they do wrong? And when I told them, they'd nod their head, pull out their notebook, and take notes. That right there is a person who's going to make it, who's going to get it right. The arrogant guys who lacked humility, they couldn't take criticism from others, and they couldn't even do an honest self-assessment because they thought they already knew everything. And then he says this, which I think is so very powerful. He says, stay humble or get humbled. Sha-na-na. Do you know life will either help you stay humble or get humbled. I believe Kendrick Lamar said it this way: sit down and be humble. Sit down and be humble. And the last thing he said, as a leader, you have to have a level of detachment from your subject matter. He said, I know it sounds horrible, but it's almost like sometimes I am not a participant in my own life. I'm an observer of the person who's doing it. So if I'm having a conversation with you and we're trying to discuss a point, sometimes I'm watching and saying to myself, am I being too emotional right now? Is the person in front of me aware of our conversation? I try to look outside of myself and I ask myself, what is the person's reaction in front of me? Because if I am not reading you correctly, if I'm seeing it only through my own emotions or my own ego, I cannot really see what you're thinking. But if I step outside of that, then I can see the real you and assess if you are getting angry, or if your ego is getting hurt, or if you're about to cave in, or if you're just simply fed up with me as a leader. If I'm raging in my own head, I might miss all of the other cues that are being given to me by the person that I'm supposed to be leading. So being able to detach as a leader is critical. And I can tell you right now, people do not know how to do this. They don't. What he is saying in essence is, get out of your feelings. When you are leading people, you have to get out of your own feelings and be able to empathize and sympathize with other people. That means when you're doing active listening, that means that you are not holding a conversation with yourself in your own head in order to try to form an argument or respond to the person in front of you. Because if you're doing that, I guarantee you're not listening. As he said, if you're raging in your own head, you're going to miss the other cues of what the person in front of you is actually trying to say to you, because you're not focused on them. You're focused on your own internal conversation and your own internal argument. And so when people say, did you just hear what I said? That's what they're talking about. And sometimes we're like, what did you say? Right? So we have to step back, especially if we're leaders, and when we're having conversations with people, we're trying to get an understanding. Let us make sure that that's actually what we're doing. That we're not saying, go ahead and tell me all about it, but then our mind is off in Hawaii. Okay? We don't want to be that leader. All right? So this has been another Daring Dialogues. I hope that I have said something today that was helpful to you. I hope that you will share this broadcast. I hope if you are a leader, you will get out of your feelings today. And especially if you have to have a leadership meeting, especially if you're going to be meeting this weekend with leaders, get out of your feelings, get out of your internal conversation, and really focus on the people in front of you and listen to what they're trying to say. All right? I want to thank you for your time and attention. Thank you, Sugar Cane, for tuning in with us today on our Facebook Live. We do have a Facebook page, Daring Dialogue. So if you search us on Facebook, you'll find our page there where we share a number of different articles throughout the week. So if you're looking for news content that we try to read and filter through, because there's so much content on Facebook, we put relevant articles of all different kind of subjects on our page, Daring Dialogues on Facebook. I want to say to you all, I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. As I said, we're going to be down in the Charlottesville, Culpeper region, and we're going to be down there praying and witnessing and sharing the love of God on tomorrow. So hopefully I will see you all back here for Monday Motivation. Remember, we're talking about kingdom discipleship and biblical hospitality. We'll be on again 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. You too have a blessed and wonderful weekend. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness, so please go out this weekend and be light in dark places. Take care and God bless.